The law of attraction lied to you. You were told that if you just think positively, visualize with enough emotion, and say the right affirmations in the right tone of voice, you'd attract everything you want: health, love, money, freedom. But if that's true, then why do so many people feel stuck even after doing everything right? Why does it feel like your manifestations hit a wall, one you can't see but always feel? Because the real mechanism behind your reality isn't thought, it's frequency. And not the polished, curated frequency you project when you're feeling high vibe, but the hidden one, the unresolved, unspoken, deeply embedded frequency that lives inside the parts of you you don't like to look at. That's what the field listens to, not your vision board, not your 5 a.m. affirmations. What you haven't healed still manifests. What you haven't released still creates. And that's what they never told you. This isn't a method. This is the mirror, and everything is about to change. There's a frequency running your life right now that you didn't choose. You didn't consciously agree to it. You didn't even notice when it started. But it's there, silent, persistent, and undeniable. And it's why, no matter how much effort you put into visualizing a better future, the same emotional cycles, the same types of relationships, the same internal roadblocks keep showing up again and again. Because while your conscious mind wants something new, the field around you is still responding to something old. This field, the energetic blueprint that surrounds and connects you, isn't listening to what you say you want. It listens to what's unresolved, to the grief you never let move through you. The memory of being rejected, of being told you weren't good enough, of not being chosen, still vibrating just beneath the surface of your daily thoughts. You don't have to think about these things for them to be active. You just have to keep ignoring them. And in that silence, the field stays tuned to a version of you that no longer exists, but still dictates the reality you experience. Your thoughts are intentions, but your frequency is the transmission. It's what actually speaks to the quantum field. And the field doesn't care if your vision board is perfect. It doesn't care how hard you try to stay positive. It doesn't operate on effort, it operates on coherence. And if your conscious desire says, "I want abundance," but your stored emotional frequency screams, "I'm still afraid of being unsafe," then safety will always be the dominant outcome. Because survival frequencies override abundance codes every time. This is why manifestation doesn't fail. It responds. It's not that you didn't manifest. You did. You just manifested what was active, not what was spoken. And this is where it gets uncomfortable, because most of what's active in your field was never chosen by you. It was absorbed, inherited, wired in through repetition, passed down through family lines and reinforced by experience. You are not just broadcasting your desires. You're broadcasting your pain, your past, your parents' beliefs, and your younger self's conclusions about what love, success, or worthiness means. And the field remembers it all. Most people try to manifest with their minds, but they don't realize their field is still filled with echoes. Echoes of heartbreak, betrayal, failure, guilt, abandonment. These echoes create distortions. They bend reality around what hasn't been resolved. That's why the future you envision feels so far away, because it's trying to land on top of a frequency that doesn't match it. This is not punishment, it's design. Not to harm you, but to return you to the part of you you've left behind. Because healing isn't just about feeling better. It's about recalibrating your frequency so the field can finally stop repeating what you never wanted. Some of the frequencies we've discovered beneath the surface, what's really causing the field to loop, can't be shared openly here. That's why we've put them inside our free Insights Academy newsletter. You'll get instant access, plus a free copy of the Kybalion when you sign up via the link below, but only for a limited time. Because when you understand that your emotional frequency is the real author of your reality, everything changes. You stop blaming the universe, and you start reading the signals. You begin to see the precision in what keeps showing up, and you realize this isn't random. It's a mirror, and the mirror has never been wrong. It's just been misunderstood. You think the universe is delaying your manifestations. It's not. It's just waiting for you to become vibrationally available to what you asked for. The moment you shift the signal, the field responds. That's how it's always worked. And the truth is, you've already seen it. That one person who appeared in your life the moment you finally let go of an ex. That opportunity that came after a breakdown you didn't think you'd survive. That peace you felt, not when you got what you wanted, but when you finally stopped chasing. These weren't coincidences. They were frequency alignments. They happened the moment your emotional field became congruent with what you claimed to want. And when that happens, manifestation stops being something you chase. It becomes something you live. You don't need to force the quantum field to respond. You just need to stop contradicting it. There are moments in your life you thought you moved on from, people you no longer speak to, emotions you believed you'd processed, chapters you closed. But if you pay close enough attention, not with your mind, but with your body, you'll feel them, still lingering, still vibrating, still shaping your perception in ways that logic can't touch. Because quantum entanglement doesn't care about time, memory, or intention. It only responds to frequency, and frequency doesn't lie. You've probably heard the term before, entanglement, maybe in a documentary, maybe in a book about quantum physics. But what they rarely explain is that it's not just about particles. It's about you, your stories, your attachments, your unresolved emotions. Entanglement is what happens when something imprints on your field with enough intensity that it begins to live there. And once it does, distance no longer weakens the bond. Time doesn't dilute it. The person could be gone, the moment long past, and yet a part of you is still vibrating in response to something that no longer exists in your physical reality, but very much still exists in your energetic one. This is why you can think you've moved on, but still find yourself attracting the same patterns, the same type of partner, the same financial ceiling, the same wave of anxiety when something good finally happens. Because the truth is, part of you is still entangled with the version of you who never got closure, who never felt safe, who never forgave themselves. And as long as that version remains active in your field, you're not manifesting from your current desires, you're manifesting from that emotional imprint. Entanglement is not memory. It's frequency memory. It's an open circuit between you and a moment that still has a charge. And the field responds to charge, not chronology. That's why some moments feel louder than others. That's why certain people trigger you even when they've done nothing wrong. That's why the past sometimes feels more real than the present. Because vibrationally, part of you is still there. You may think you're making new choices, but if those choices are being filtered through the lens of an entangled emotional field, then they're not new at all. They're echoes, repetitions, variations of the same story wearing a different face. This is why healing isn't just about insight. It's not about understanding the pattern intellectually. It's about recognizing the thread, feeling the frequency, and then choosing, with full presence, to release the emotional charge that's kept the thread alive. This isn't about forgetting the past. It's about reintegrating the parts of you that got left behind. Because every time you suppress an emotion, abandon a feeling, or ignore an intuitive signal, a thread is formed. A piece of you gets stuck in that moment. And the field, in its infinite neutrality, continues to echo that signal until you come back for it, until you see it, until you feel it, not to analyze it, but to reclaim it. This is the real reason you keep attracting what you don't want. Not because you're broken, not because you're doing something wrong, but because the field is loyal. It mirrors what's active. And what's active is what's emotionally unresolved. You can't override that with vision boards. You can't out-manifest it with hustle. The only way to shift the field is to collapse the charge. So ask yourself this, not from the mind, but from the body. What are you still entangled with? Who are you still emotionally linked to, even without contact? What old versions of yourself are still vibrating within you, shaping how you respond, what you attract, and what you fear? The real question isn't whether you're manifesting. You are, constantly. The real question is, from what frequency? Because until you identify the threads, you will keep weaving the same outcomes. You'll keep attracting mirrors of the very thing you say you've healed. Not as punishment, but as invitation. To feel, to integrate, to return. Not everything that's invisible is gone. Some of it is just waiting for you to look. It's one of the hardest things to accept. You can't think your way out of the frequency you're vibrating in. You can't script your way out. You can't meditate yourself into a new reality if, beneath that practice, you're still entangled with an emotional truth you haven't touched. You've been told to think positive, to stay high vibe, to focus only on the good. But the field doesn't respond to surface affirmations. It responds to what's real. And sometimes what's real is messy, unresolved, and deeply uncomfortable. That's why most people's manifestations fail, not because they didn't want it enough, but because their internal signal was saying something completely different. You can sit in front of a mirror saying, "I am abundant." But if your nervous system is still wired for survival, if your field is still looping a memory of scarcity, then abundance can't stick. Because the quantum field doesn't care about the words you speak, it cares about the vibration you emit. And the vibration that wins is always the one with the most emotional charge. Always. That's why people keep getting the same outcomes, even after doing the work. Because what's unresolved will always speak louder than what's desired. It's not your fault. You were taught to override your pain, to suppress your fear, to fake confidence until it became real. But what no one told you is that suppression doesn't dissolve the frequency, it intensifies it. Repressing emotion doesn't silence it, it just sends it deeper into the field. And then you wonder why your reality contradicts your intentions. You say you're ready for love, but your body still expects abandonment. You say you're open to wealth, but your field still vibrates with the shame of being seen. You say you're confident, but deep down, you still carry the memory of being made small. And so, life responds accordingly. This is the cruel paradox of spiritual bypassing. It tells you to focus on the light, but ignores the shadows that shape your vibration. It teaches you to visualize better outcomes, but never shows you how to clear the residue of the past. And without that clearing, your manifestations become mismatched projections, wishes built on foundations that were never stable to begin with. Here's the truth. The strongest frequency always wins. And strength isn't volume, it's coherence. It's the emotional congruence between what you say and what you actually feel. When your intention and your frequency match, the field responds instantly. But if there's a contradiction, if your conscious desires are misaligned with your unconscious truth, the field doesn't split the difference. It goes with what's active. And what's active is usually the part of you you've been avoiding. That's why you can attract something beautiful, only to sabotage it, or get close to a breakthrough, only to fall back into an old loop, because part of you doesn't believe it's safe to have what you want, or worthy, or real. And until that part is integrated, not pushed aside or shamed or ignored, but truly seen and felt and reclaimed, you will keep watching your manifestations evaporate the moment they arrive. You're not being punished, you're being invited. Invited to align, not just in thought, but in presence, in emotional integrity, in vibrational truth. There is no manifestation without coherence, not lasting at least, because when your frequency doesn't match your desire, the desire can't land. The field isn't resisting you, it's just reflecting you. And the reflection will continue to repeat until you realize this. The work isn't about chasing higher frequencies. It's about dissolving the interference that's blocking the one already inside you. The interference is the entanglement, and the only way to untangle it is to stop pretending it isn't there. The real question isn't, how do I manifest more? It's, what inside me is still vibrating against what I say I want? Because that's the frequency shaping your life. Not your vision board. Not your mantra, your vibration. And that vibration is not something you control. It's something you meet. You've been told the past is gone, that time is linear, that what happened already is done and over. But that's not how the field works. In quantum terms, the past doesn't sit behind you like a finished chapter. It lingers, it loops, it vibrates, not as memory, but as energy, as frequency. And unless it's fully integrated, it keeps folding back into the present moment, shaping what appears to be your now. That's why change feels so hard. You're not just trying to move forward, you're trying to move through what hasn't collapsed yet. Your field isn't made of time, it's made of resonance. And resonance doesn't care about clocks or calendars. It cares about what's still alive in you, what's still unfinished, what's still emotionally charged. That's why some people feel stuck for years, even after changing cities, careers, relationships, because moving on physically doesn't collapse the frequency, and the field only responds when the charge is gone. This is where most manifestation work fails. People try to overlay new affirmations on top of an old frequency. They try to install a new belief without uninstalling the energy that contradicts it. But that's not how it works. You can't build a future on top of a frequency you haven't cleared. It's like trying to plant seeds in soil that's never been turned over. Nothing takes root. Or it does, and dies just as quickly. The field is always listening, and it responds with perfect precision to what's vibrating within you, not what you're pretending is there. Every moment of trauma, neglect, betrayal, suppression, if it was never fully processed, left behind more than a memory. It left behind a vibrational marker, a thread. And unless that thread is felt, seen, and collapsed, it doesn't disappear. It persists, quietly, consistently, calling in new versions of the same emotional experience, again and again, until it's finally met with presence. This is why life repeats itself, not as punishment, not because you're failing, but because something unresolved is still active, something unintegrated is still authoring the field around you. The quantum field is not responding to your words, it's responding to what's still energetically alive in you, even if your conscious mind has forgotten it entirely. That's why triggers matter. That's why your reactions matter, because they're signals, pulses from within the field telling you, hey, this hasn't been collapsed yet. What you call blocks are not external, they're echoes, fragments, unseen charges that bend the timeline around themselves. You think the future is ahead of you, but vibrationally, you're still circling an old moment. And until that moment is integrated, no amount of visioning or intention setting will override its pull. Because the field is always collapsing into form based on your dominant frequency, not your dominant thought. But here's the part no one talks about. Collapsing a frequency doesn't require years of work. It doesn't require fixing yourself. It requires feeling what you've avoided. Presence is the solvent. When you become fully present with an old emotion, without judgment, without story, it begins to collapse. The thread begins to dissolve. And as it dissolves, the field reconfigures. This is the collapse point. It's not a breakdown. It's a re-entry, a reunion. You re-enter the feeling you left behind. You bring consciousness to what was unconscious. And in doing so, you stop being entangled with it. That's when the field shifts. That's when the loop ends. Real transformation doesn't happen when you force yourself to think better. It happens when you let the unresolved collapse under the weight of your full awareness. Not because you're pushing it, but because you're finally holding it. When you understand that the past doesn't need to be fixed, it needs to be felt, you stop fearing it. You stop running from it. And you start meeting it like an old version of yourself that's been waiting. Not to haunt you, but to be held by the you who finally knows how. You were taught that everything is separate, that your mind and body, your past and future, your inner world and the world outside you, exist in isolation. But nothing could be further from the truth. The deeper you look into the nature of reality, whether through science, spirituality, or experience, the more one truth becomes undeniable. Everything is connected. And not metaphorically, literally, not in sentiment, but in structure. Modern quantum physics stumbled upon it when they discovered entanglement. Two particles, once connected, stay connected, across space, and time. Change the state of one, and the other responds instantly, even if they're galaxies apart. Sounds mystical, doesn't it? But what ancient mystics knew centuries ago, physicists are only now beginning to prove. The field doesn't just connect things, it unifies them. Sufis called it Tawhid, the oneness of all creation. Taoists spoke of the Tao, the underlying energy from which all things emerge. Vedic sages spoke of Brahman, the boundless field of consciousness that underlies all phenomena, and all of them pointed to the same truth: separation is an illusion. A necessary illusion for the ego to function, but an illusion nonetheless. What you think is out there is actually a reflection of what's in here. The line doesn't exist. It never did. The field doesn't distinguish between a traumatic memory you've repressed and an argument you had last night. Both exist as energy. Both ripple through your system. Both alter the way the quantum field responds to you. That's why your past isn't just your past, it's your present frequency. That's why your surroundings aren't just random. They're instructive. Every person, every situation, every loop you're stuck in is not happening to you. It's emerging from you. And that doesn't mean blame. It means power. Because if you're the one carrying the resonance, you're also the one who can shift it. But to do that, you have to stop compartmentalizing. Stop pretending that healing is separate from manifestation, that science is separate from spirituality, that emotions are separate from energy. Everything affects everything. Western psychology is finally catching up. Studies on somatic trauma, epigenetics, and neuroplasticity are all saying the same thing. The body stores memory. The subconscious repeats patterns. The brain can change, and frequencies that were once fixed can be rewritten, not through wishful thinking, but through deep presence and emotional integration. We tend to think of energy as something vague, something abstract. But energy is emotion in motion. It's not woo-woo, it's physics. Your unresolved grief, that's a frequency. Your repressed anger, that's a frequency. Your shame, your heartbreak, your fear, all frequencies. And all of them, if not collapsed, continue to resonate in your field, influencing what shows up in your life and how you respond to it. There's no hierarchy here. A spiritual wound and a psychological one are both distortions in the same field. A scarcity pattern from childhood and an ancestral fear passed down through generations. Same field. The system doesn't care whether your pain came from this life or another. It just responds to what's still vibrating. This is why integration is the highest form of power. Because when you integrate a part of yourself that's been disowned, when you feel what you've never allowed yourself to feel, you change the entire structure of the field around you. The signal shifts, and the results follow, not because you forced anything, but because you finally aligned. It's no longer about adding more mantras, more visualizations, more spiritual hacks. It's about subtracting what's false, the beliefs that aren't yours, the expectations you inherited, the emotions you buried, the programs you've outgrown. The more you release, the more you return to your natural frequency, and the clearer your field becomes. At some point, you stop asking, "How do I get what I want?" and start asking, "What inside me is still keeping it out?" Because the field is ready, reality is responsive. But if you're still entangled with what no longer serves you, then the future can't land. The frequency doesn't match. Every teaching that ever mattered, from the Tao Te Ching to the Emerald Tablets, pointed toward this. Liberation isn't about fixing the external. It's about recognizing that the external was never separate from you to begin with. And once you see that, you don't just manifest differently, you live differently. Because now, you're not chasing energy, you're becoming it. There comes a moment on the path when the noise becomes unbearable. Not the noise outside, the world's distractions, its endless self-help tips, its overused affirmations, but the noise within. That quiet, persistent, static humming underneath everything you do. You keep pushing forward. You keep setting intentions. You keep doing the work, but it still feels like something's pulling you backward. Something invisible, something familiar. That moment, the breaking point, isn't the end. It's the beginning. The awakening doesn't come when you master manifestation techniques. It comes when you realize you were never in control of what you were manifesting in the first place. Because it was never about your conscious mind. It was about your field. And the field doesn't respond to effort. It responds to honesty, to presence, to collapse. You see, what most people don't realize is that manifestation isn't a game of addition. It's a game of subtraction. The more masks you wear, the more layers you build, the more strategies you collect, the further you move from what's real. And what's real is this. If something keeps showing up in your life, no matter how hard you try to shift it, it's not a curse. It's a mirror, and it's showing you where you're still entangled. This is the part where people turn away. Because collapsing old frequencies isn't comfortable. It's raw. It's inconvenient. It asks you to face the parts of yourself you've spent years avoiding. The heartbreak you buried, the shame you numbed, the anger you learned to swallow. Most people would rather stay in control. But control is a prison dressed as safety. It gives you the illusion of order, while secretly feeding the chaos inside. True transformation begins the moment you stop trying to control what shows up and start becoming radically curious about why it's there. What haven't I seen? What haven't I felt? Who am I still entangled with, even in silence? These aren't questions for your mind to solve. They're invitations for your body to answer. Because while your thoughts might lie, your field never does. Your energy speaks in truth, whether or not your words do. That's why presence, not performance, is what cracks the code. The second you stop performing for the universe and start being fully, brutally honest with it, things begin to move. Reality shifts not because you pushed hard enough, but because you finally aligned with the truth of what's actually present. People think they need to be positive to manifest, but it's not positivity the field responds to. It's congruence, integrity, coherence. When your inner world contradicts your outer desire, the field always chooses the stronger signal. And more often than not, that signal is the wound you haven't healed, the belief you haven't questioned, the loop you haven't broken. So when reality repeats, it's not punishing you. It's giving you another chance to collapse what's outdated. It's handing you a mirror, not to shame you, but to set you free. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you are. Not what you pretend to be, not what you hope to become, but what you are, right now, in your frequency, in your nervous system, in your subconscious. And until you own every piece of that, without bypassing, without blaming, without running, the cycle continues. The field doesn't skip steps, it mirrors them. This is where the game ends and the real work begins. Because the field is far more intelligent than most people think. It's not a vending machine where you punch in your desires and wait for them to drop. It's a mirror made of frequency and emotion, and it only reflects what's already alive inside you. So if you're still chasing, still grasping, still trying to force something into form, it means you haven't yet collapsed the frequency that's holding the old in place. Collapse doesn't require effort. It requires stillness. It requires you to stop running long enough to hear what the body is actually saying. That's when the shift happens. Not when you get louder, but when you get quieter. Not when you fix yourself, but when you feel yourself. When you let the old grief rise. When you let the fear be seen. When you stop hiding from your own shadow and invite it in. That's collapse, and that's freedom. Because in that collapse, the illusion of control dies, and something deeper is born. This is the moment of truth. You can keep trying to manage your reality from the surface, or you can meet it at the source, where the energy lives, where the patterns breathe, where the frequencies form. That's where the field is listening, not to your words, but to your resonance. And when your resonance changes, your entire life rewrites itself around it, without effort, without struggle, without force. It all begins the moment you stop chasing and start collapsing. If the field responds to frequency, then the most radical act of all is connection, real connection, not surface-level bonding, not curated relationships that maintain your ego or confirm your worldview, but soul-level connection that challenges you, mirrors you, and breaks your illusions apart. Because here's the secret no one tells you. Isolation amplifies programming. When you're alone in your mind, your unchallenged beliefs become law. Your fears become facts. Your traumas become identities. But the moment you enter conscious community, where truth is valued more than comfort, your entire energetic field begins to rewire. We've been sold the idea that awakening is a solitary journey, that if you just meditate hard enough, journal deep enough, or read the right spiritual books, you'll arrive. But awareness doesn't evolve in isolation. It sharpens in reflection. Growth happens in tension, when someone else sees the blind spots you've learned to hide. When you say something out loud that's lived inside for too long. When you allow another human to witness your unraveling without flinching or fixing. That's the field in motion. And it moves faster in connection than it ever will in isolation. But not all connection is created equal. Many relationships are forged in codependency, unconscious agreements, and shared delusions. You call it love, but it's really a mutual agreement to avoid growth. You call it friendship, but it's really a place to dump your pain without accountability. The field doesn't lie about relationships. It records the unspoken contracts. Who am I allowed to be here? What part of myself do I have to suppress to keep this dynamic alive? And more importantly, what old wound does this person help me protect? That's why critical thinking isn't optional. It's essential, because most of your emotional entanglements are invisible until you start asking better questions. Why do I keep attracting the same type of partner? Why does success still make me feel guilty? Why do I shrink around certain people? Why does manifestation feel like effort instead of alignment? These aren't problems to fix. They're breadcrumbs. And if you follow them, they'll lead you straight to the core of your field's current programming. That's the beginning of sovereignty. But sovereignty doesn't come from cutting people off or isolating yourself in the name of boundaries. It comes from discerning what frequency you're allowing into your space and why. It comes from becoming brutally honest about who activates your higher self and who sedates it. Connection is medicine, but like any medicine, it can heal or harm depending on the dose and the intention. A single conversation with the right person can do more to shift your field than 100 affirmations in the mirror. And the most powerful people are not the ones with the best affirmations, they're the ones with the cleanest fields. The truth is, the world doesn't need more manifestors. It needs more embodied beings. People who stop trying to manifest a better life and start becoming a clearer channel for life to move through. That clarity doesn't come from effort, it comes from alignment. And alignment begins with awareness. Because until you become aware of how you're programmed, you'll keep confusing sabotage for intuition. You'll keep thinking the universe is blocking you, when really, it's mirroring you. The field is never punishing you. It's always reflecting you, precisely, consistently, and without exception. So stop asking, what do I need to attract? And start asking, what am I still emitting? What am I unconsciously projecting into the field every time I speak, every time I think, every time I step into a room? What am I silently screaming beneath the surface of my smile? This isn't paranoia, it's precision. The clearer your frequency, the cleaner your life becomes. The more honest your self-inquiry, the faster your external reality recalibrates. The beauty of this work is that it doesn't require you to fix yourself, it requires you to see yourself. Fully, completely, without judgment, without denial, without decoration. And in that seeing, the field starts to shift. You're not manifesting a new life. You're collapsing the illusion that kept you from it. And suddenly, you're not fighting to change your reality. You're watching it reorganize itself around your truth. It starts with presence, it deepens with connection, and it becomes unstoppable with clarity. Not clarity of goals, but clarity of being. Because once you become clear in your field, the field becomes clear in its reflection. Everything you've been taught about manifesting tells you to focus forward on what's next, what's possible, what you desire to create. But the real shift doesn't happen by moving forward. It happens by turning around and facing what's still running behind you. That invisible loop that keeps pulling you back into the same cycles of lack, sabotage, confusion, and delay. And no matter how hard you try to leap into a new timeline, that loop drags you like a ghost still attached to your heels. Because you're not creating from scratch, you're creating from code. And until you break the code, the cycle repeats. The code is emotional, it's vibrational, it's memory-based. Every time you felt abandoned, unseen, or ashamed, and didn't process it, it didn't disappear. It became an instruction. One your field still obeys. If your childhood taught you love was conditional, your field will reject unconditional love, even if you consciously crave it. If your early success was met with jealousy or punishment, your nervous system will associate growth with danger. And the field? It listens to your body, not your mind. It reads your energy, not your desires. It responds to your baseline, not your goals. So you end up chasing change with a system wired to recreate the past. You try to manifest abundance from a frequency built on fear. You visualize love from a place of self-doubt. You affirm safety while holding tension in your gut. And then you wonder why nothing sticks. It's not because you're broken. It's because your field is coherent. And coherence always prioritizes survival over expansion. Your nervous system would rather stay in familiar pain than risk unfamiliar joy. That's the trap. And most people never escape it because they're trying to think their way out of a frequency they've never felt safe enough to exit. Breaking the cycle doesn't mean thinking bigger. It means collapsing the timeline of origin. The first betrayal, the first wound. The first time your body learned it wasn't safe to be open, or expressive, or soft. You don't need to go back and relive the trauma, but you do need to feel what it left behind. The echo, the residue, the imprint that still lingers in your responses, your choices, your relationships. That's where the shift begins, not in what you do, but in what you finally allow yourself to feel without resistance. Presence is the scalpel. It cuts through noise. It dissolves denial. It makes the unconscious conscious, not by force, but by attention. When you bring presence to the part of you that flinches at love or freezes in abundance, you're telling the field, this no longer needs to run. And that signal, that's what shifts your reality, not effort, not hustle, not willpower. Just presence, sustained, honest, embodied attention to what's real now, not what was or what could be. This is what it means to collapse the loop. You stop feeding the past by seeing it clearly. You starve the pattern by noticing the payoff. Every cycle has a payoff, validation, identity, a sense of control. The moment you name it, it loses its power. The moment you realize that suffering has been serving a purpose, the spell breaks. Because now you have a choice, and choice is where sovereignty begins. It's not about fixing yourself. It's about recognizing what isn't you, the inherited shame, the borrowed beliefs, the emotional DNA passed down like furniture, never questioned. You didn't choose this programming, but you can choose to end it. And when you do, you don't just shift your life, you shift the field for those who come after you. That's the power of collapse. When one person exits the loop, the ripple is generational. This is why breaking free from emotional cycles is the most radical act of manifestation, because it doesn't just change what you attract, it changes who you are when it arrives. It stops you from recreating the same chaos in a different form. It ends the sabotage disguised as safety, and it opens a space for something you've never truly experienced before: alignment without effort, flow without fear, abundance without guilt. And the most beautiful part? You don't need to do it alone. That's the lie the system sold you, that awakening is a solo mission, but collective consciousness is a multiplier. When you surround yourself with people who are also collapsing their loops, the shift accelerates. You borrow courage. You trade clarity. You mirror each other's liberation until the whole field starts to reorganize. If this sounds like a message you've been waiting your whole life to hear, it's because your field brought you here, and the work doesn't end with watching a video. It begins with the conversations you start after it, the truths you tell yourself tonight, the parts of your life you stop avoiding tomorrow. There's no shortcut, but there is momentum. And the second you decide to stop looping, you become the disruption your lineage has been waiting for. What if success isn't what you think it is? What if everything you've been chasing, status, stability, recognition, was never the destination, but the distraction? Every system you grew up inside gave you a map, a direction, a purpose. But the truth is, most of those purposes were borrowed, assigned, or imposed. You didn't choose them. You inherited them. And now, with all the right boxes checked, career, relationships, maybe even money, you still feel it. That ache, that quiet whisper in the dark asking, is this really it? You see, the final piece of quantum manifestation isn't attracting more. It's remembering who you are without the noise. It's realizing that manifestation was never about getting. It was always about aligning. Not to goals, but to truth. Your truth. The deeper one underneath the conditioning, the personas, the survival strategies. That self doesn't need to succeed in the way the world defines it. That self is already whole, already magnetic, already powerful, once the distortion is cleared. That's why so many people manifest what they thought they wanted and still feel empty, because their desires were shaped by trauma, not truth. A child who never felt seen grows up to chase fame. A person raised in scarcity sets their soul on fire to secure wealth. A body taught to fear abandonment learns to perform love instead of feel it. The manifestation might come, the money might arrive, the partner might appear, but the field doesn't lie, and neither does your nervous system. You'll still feel out of sync, off balance, unsettled, because the energy behind the manifestation carries more weight than the outcome itself. To truly redefine success, you have to detach from the performance of life and step into the presence of it. Let go of the idea that you're building something, fixing something, or proving something. You're not here to prove, you're here to remember. And when you do, manifestation stops being a tool and starts becoming a side effect, a byproduct of alignment. No chasing, no forcing, just flow. Not because you're lucky, but because you're finally coherent. So, what does real purpose look like when you strip away the noise? It's not grandiose. It's not tied to titles or achievements. It's often quiet, subtle. It's the energy of someone fully alive in their truth. It's a life that feels like an exhale. It's choosing peace over performance, expression over expectation. It's having the courage to let your life reflect your essence, not your ego. And here's the paradox. When you live that way, really live that way, what used to be hard becomes natural. Opportunities arrive, people shift, the field opens. You don't need to become someone new to manifest the life you want. You need to release who you were taught to be, the one who chased validation, the one who equated effort with worth, the one who traded authenticity for approval. Let them go, not with shame, but with compassion. They helped you survive, but they can't help you thrive. Not anymore. This is your moment, not to hustle harder, not to think more positively, but to see clearly, to recognize how much of your energy has been spent running from the discomfort of being still with yourself. That stillness? That's the key. That's where the collapse begins. That's where you meet the parts of you that have been manifesting chaos, because that's what they knew. That's where you hold them, hear them, and then free them. And once they're free, so are you. The game changes when your internal frequency no longer contradicts your external desires. When your nervous system doesn't flinch at what you ask for. When your body says yes without fear. That's the alignment no affirmation can fake. That's the success no external validation can touch. It's quieter than you expected, but more powerful than you ever imagined. And the best part? You don't have to do it alone. Join the thousands of others walking this path with us inside Insights Academy, our free newsletter where we reveal what can't be shared here on YouTube. You'll receive a free ebook copy of the Kybalion for a limited time only to support your deeper understanding of the universal laws shaping your reality. Don't just watch transformation, live it. The link is in the description. The world taught you to measure your life by what you own, how you look, and how much applause you get. But now, you know better. Measure it by how deeply you feel, how courageously you love, and how often you choose truth over comfort. That's the real manifestation. That's the ultimate revolution, and it starts inside of you. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."